Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the 2026 International Symposium on Cooperative Identity and Energizing the Cooperative Brand. I'm Erin Hancock. I'm the Education Manager with the International Center for Cooperative Management out of the Sobey School of Business at St. Mary's University in Nova Scotia, Canada. We wanted to get underway one of our very special presentations, but before that, we would love to just make sure everyone is savvy with the technology. Certainly with the translation, you'll see in the chat, there is information about how to click on your preferred language so you can keep up. Give a moment for folks to do that. And I will also emphasize that this session is set up as a Zoom meeting, meaning that this is a shared space. If you have comments, questions, links that you want to drop along the way, please feel free to use the chat to do that. You also will be able to see and make direct connections through the chat as well with everyone who's here. The program and the flow are on the website. I will also drop it into the chat. Within that area, you'll see the goals of the program. You'll see the themes. You'll see connections and links to other things that are happening, as well as speaker bios and what's happening the rest of the day and tomorrow. I wanted to give my gratitude to .coop, as well as to the Northwest Cooperative Development Center for being co-organizers and sponsors of this event, making it free for the 400 plus people that have signed up to be able to be here, and also to Co-ops and Mutuals Canada, who are offering their support as well as the technology that allows us to translate and bring more people into the fold. And lastly, a big debt of gratitude to our elders, past and present, here in Mi'kma'ki territory, in Eastern Canada, here in Nova Scotia, the land of the Mi'kmaq people, under the treaties of peace and friendship. And just to name our center, I'll drop more information about what's coming up in our center in the chat, but we have a lot of programming, both online and in person, as well as we are currently offering enrollment to our online certificate, graduate diploma, and master's in cooperative and credit union management. We're coming to the end of that enrollment period, and we still have space, and we'd love to invite people to consider that. So I'll drop information about that into the chat. And now I wanted to hand it over to Erbin Crowell, who you'll see his bio, a multi-hat person, someone who we're always grateful to have involved in these things, and who teaches at our center as well, and is an alumni and shining example. Let me embarrass you, Erbin, as an alumni of our Master in Management Co-ops and Credit Unions program. Over to you, Erbin.
Well, thank you so much, Erin. And yeah, thank you to all the folks at the center for all their support in making this symposium happen. As Erin mentioned, my name is Erbin Crowell. I serve as Executive Director of the Neighboring Food Co-op Association, also on the board of the National Cooperative Business Association here in the U.S. and DotCooperation. Also serve on the board of the Cooperative Management Education Co-op that oversees the program at St. Mary's. So wonderful to be here with you all. We have a great session today with a lot of energy, excitement, and expertise that I think contributes a lot to this symposium. So we have our keynote and panel today on cooperative labeling and brand recognition with a focus on strengthening the cooperative identity. And then we will have a keynote from Jeroen Douglas, and then a panel of people to follow up in conversation. But I want to take as little time away from Jeroen as I can, just to introduce our keynote speaker. Jeroen Douglas is a Dutch national and joined the International Cooperative Alliance as Director General in 2024. Previously, he served as Executive Director of Solidaridad, an international civil society organization, from 2019 to 2023. He joined in 1992 as a campaign officer. In 2009, he became Director in Latin America, managing finance, governance, partnership, advocacy, and fundraising in the region. In 2016, he was appointed Solidaridad's strategic director and drove the development of the network's 2016 to 2020 strategy, being responsible for network-wide policy and related program implementations. He also has a background in theology and cultural anthropology, which he and I share, and also an extensive experience in the fair trade movement and all the opportunities and complications that brings to our movement and engaging consumers in our work. So, Jeroen, the table is yours.
That's a very lengthy but quite adequate introduction, Erbin. Thank you so much for moderating this session. Of course, many thanks to St. Mary's to host this. This theme is so close to my heart. And indeed, it's a long way coming, some 4 decades working on this matter, trying to make a better world in the world of trade. And everything just Urban told, some form comes together by showing you this pack of coffee. I just bought this coffee this afternoon, quite randomly at my local groceries. I personally never heard of the brand, to be honest, so it's new on the shelf. So I'm neutral. I have no shares in it. It's really new. I've never seen it before. But what I wanted to show to you here is, as part of a lecture, the differences between all those names and all the things that come together in this half a kilo of coffee. As you may see here at the bottom, no, you won't, because it's new. Here, very tiny at the bottom, it has the name of the company. It's called the Hot Drinks Company Limited, based in the Netherlands. Never heard of it. It seems just to be 20 miles away from where I live. Incredible. But on the other side, we have the brand Wayang Coffee Beans. That's the brand name. Here you can see the marquee, they position it as a premium coffee bean from Indonesia. Make impact slow roasted. On top, it says climate neutral certified. So there's a certification in it. Climate neutral certified. There's so much of information on just this pack of coffee, but you ain't seen nothing yet because we go here to the other side. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about this. This is Rainforest Alliance certified. So the coffee is compliant to a certification standard at the coffee farms. Rainforest Alliance, I've been working with them. Actually, I merged it with UT Certified myself. Is one of the dear programs to my heart. It's very close to what Fair Trade does. The funny thing is they have a dark roast which says Fair Trade here. So they have either Rainforest Alliance for the not so dark roast and then the Rainforest Alliance, Fair Trade for the dark roast and then the Rainforest Alliance for this one. But next to that, look at this. It says climate neutral certified. This climate neutral certified has recently been declared illegal by the European Commission. So this label in itself is not valid anymore. And I think they're just finishing the last packs because it should not be used anymore. What is also very interesting, however, is that you look on this side of the pack and it has a QR code. So what I did for you, I'm going to share that with you, is the website that should, let me see, how can I get to the website? That's an issue. I'll get there, don't worry. Yeah, here it
Say
is.
it out loud. We can drop it in the chat, Jeroen.
No, I have it. No, I wanted to show you this. It's very important. So the website brings you to the origins of the coffee. And only now you can see our co-ops. So through the QR code, you can see that this is coffee sourced by different co-ops. So co-ops is not on the pack, but it is, as you can see, through the QR code to be found here. So then I was looking more detailedly to this carbon neutrality, and then I went to deepen out that to see who is behind that carbon neutrality label. So the carbon neutrality label is now moving to this, the climate activators. I got a bit suspicious because it said 404 page not found, because that is because of the new regulation coming in that this label, this claim of carbon neutral cannot be made anymore by the European Commission. And therefore I went to Anthesis, and Anthesis happens to be the organization that is supporting companies to become less carbon footprinted. So it's not carbon neutral anymore, but on its way to become less carbon influential. So I'll scroll down to this. I've never heard about this group specialized in all kinds of regulations, ESG solutions. And guess what? This company is certified B Corps. So all I wanted to say is that through this little pack of coffee, we get the whole story of this very session. From here, I will now move to a more detailed slide deck, because the slide deck that I'm going to share with you now is sort of nothing more and nothing less an extension to what I just told you in relation to this pack of coffee. So here we go. And I just go to main page. Oh no, that is not good. I need to stop this. Sorry about that. It won't take long. It's just that the bar up is making me nervous now. It should not, but it is. Okay, here again, we're going to give it a try. Yes, now I can get there. So we're now actually at some of my slides. And the first one is, what is in a brand, in a mark, in a label, in the world of sustainability? I think I showed you through this simple pack of coffee the types of marks, systems that are used in the world of sustainability. And it's a bit of a lecture, but it's important to realize that we're dealing with a product mark. For instance, this Rainforest Alliance tells you something about the coffee. That's a product mark. It's a mark telling you something about the product and its content. But we also have an enterprise mark, and Jed will tell all about it. B Corps is an enterprise mark. It tells you about the performance of the company behind this very coffee. We also have systems marked, for instance, ISO 14001, ISO 11000, but also regenerative agriculture. I will talk about that. It's telling you about the system, how a product or a service is being made. And then very uniquely, we have a collective, a movement mark, which is the current status of co-ops, but there are others. So I just wanted to share you this so that we have an idea on the types of marks that are around. And I don't want to get into the semantics and the confusions of marks and labels and marquees. Just for the sake of simpleness, we stick with marks versus brands. So how sustainability marks can evolve in time. So, and I'm actually sharing a little bit my journey. So I still mention it, the Solidaridad pyramid of change. We never trademarked it, but that's really the essence of my previous job before I joined the ICA. Erbin was telling about it. Every part of the pyramid is 10 years of hard work. So at the top, we started with consumer labels, organic and fair trade. I came right from university in 1987. That was before the Berlin Wall came down, when we decided to develop fair trade. But we did it in a Dutch way. Erbin, you know that. You used the word Max Havelaar. You will remember that, right? And we were very aware when the Berlin Wall came down, we had reached the end of history. You know, retracting governments, no more intervention from states, communism was defeated, and the market will solve all the problems of the world. Prosperity is on the horizon for everyone. But we well knew that down there in Guatemala or in Kenya or in Indonesia are still coffee farmers who have a very hard time to find a business case. So we decided as a church-linked organization back then to develop a direct trade line, as we say it, cutting the coyotes, taking out the middleman, trying to shorten the supply chain. Did you know that for a cup of coffee, on average, 23 steps are in between? You know that from Equal Exchange, Erbin. And what we wanted to do, as you did, is trying to cut some of those steps in the supply chain to ensure that there is more money freed up to pay a fair price to the farmers. So fair trade was a really consumer label. We managed to persuade consumers not because of the brand, but the primary message on the pack of coffee was the label, fair trade. I want to buy that. That took 10 years to position it. And I'm proud, I can say, that with thousands of people, we are now a movement of 750 million consumers daily in a range of products. But it started really with this initiative, and I was part of that. So then 10 years afterwards, I'm talking about the 90s, companies said, wait a minute, these fair trade guys, they have found a new gap in the marketplace. I also want to be there. So they went to develop corporate social responsibility labels. And they have their own standards. But what they did in the meantime, very sneaky, is to put the weight of evidence from the companies towards the weakest chain in the supply chain, which are the farmers. Because if you were to qualify for a fair trade label, you as a company, we call it the 5 of fair trade, you had to promise and to show that you give long-term contracts to farmers, that you give a guaranteed minimum price, that you give a price premium so as to invest, that you have pre-financing offered, and that you also work on an inclusivity program. So those are the 5 of fair trade. So the demand for change was at the company. And what you see with corporate social responsibility, that gradually the larger corporates decided that the demand for change needed to move to the weakest, and that is to become a sustainable farmer. So sustainability was now the prerogative of the weakest of the supply chain, and it became a license to operate rather than a change in the market. 10 years after that, when all those large companies knocked my door, I felt very proud. I was unaware that they were sort of hijacking my love baby. They said, let's organize a round table. Let's organize a pre-competitive system. And I worked then 10 years in building the round table for sustainable palm oil. I did that with Worldwide Life Fund, WWF. I was the president of the Roundtable for Responsible Soy, and deforestation-free soy from the Amazon. I went into Bon Sucre for sugarcane. We did the same for cocoa, for beef. And roundtables and multi-stakeholder initiatives were really led by producers. That was the basic idea. And it became like a intelligence label at best. And then after 3 decades of voluntary sustainability standards, we finally managed to get to mandatory sustainability standards, which is legislation. So after having experienced 30 years on sustainability, finally the governments came on board with their legislation. One of them was that it's prohibited to make the claim of being climate neutral. And that's a mandatory restriction. So this is my personal journey. When things became sort of in the realm of legislation, I thought sector transformation has reached its highest point. It's time to go back to my original passion, which are co-ops. And here you can see quickly how this bell curve developed. We started with the innovators, we moved to the early adopters, then we moved to the early majority. And those 3 steps can be achieved through carrots and through incentives. Those are the winners in the marketplace. They have value add. I mean, this same pack of coffee, it's been sold for 24 euros a kilo. You're paying the premium price, but you get all those stamps on it. You're not buying the coffee, you're buying a story. You're buying a feel-good sensation. The late majority and the laggards can only be achieved by the stick, which is legislation. But ultimately, if you have them all, you can sort of lift the entire market to the next level. So that's been my story. In that process, when we created the fair trade mark, I started with Max Havelaar. You can see on the very left. And the Belgians say, nice label, Max Havelaar. And the Danish said, yes, we do that too. Because Max Havelaar, you need to know, is a Dutch historic figure. It's a compulsory reading at high school. It's the gentleman who was working for the Dutch colonial regime in Indonesia, in the West Indies. And he gradually turned sides to the very poor slave laborers and said, I'm not going to squeeze them out anymore on behalf of some arrogant Dutch governors. So Max Havelaar became like a hero name, and that was the beginning of fair trade. But we did not realize enough at that time, simple as we were not thinking in global branding, that this is not a name that will work in neighboring countries. So the Germans said, sorry, we have other historic pains than colonial ones. Don't give us that colonial pain on top. So they said we go for transfer. So anyway, from there, that was the start, 88, 89, 90. And then we began to realize that it is silly not to go for a unified approach. So then the different logos that came up, and I put equal exchange, maybe it's historically not on the right order, forgive me, Erbin. But anyway, many logos came up, and we realized how smart it is at the beginning, and we were just 10 countries, only 15, that how good it is that we at least try to unify, to have one single standard with those 5 of max, as I call them, the 5 requirements to become fair trade, right? This premium, pre-financing, long-term contracts. I just told that. So merging into one standard was very difficult because the Germans gave a different twist to fair trade than the Americans. Then you had another alternative fair trade in the United States. I don't want to go into the story of Paul Rice. That's too long. But unifying this, and then also finally create one institute, the Fair Trade Labeling Organization Institute in Bonn, Germany, took 7 years. And it felt like 14 years, let me just say that. It was a heck of a job to get that done. We thought about principles, logos, names. It was incredible. So nowadays, you see all these product marks. It is I would say, a forest, a tropical forest full of labels. So the world of product marks, which started really at the 80s, have now become like, a simple license to operate. Everyone wants to have a mark. Management certification schemes, just quickly, because I know, conscious of time, we cannot talk too long. You have seen BSI certifying ISO 900,001, ISO 14001. Those don't pretend to be communication labels, but many companies want to show to their peers, business to business, that they have solid systems in place. Another interesting certification scheme, though, is Region Agri. Region Agri is certifying a system of doing agriculture. If you want to know more about that, regionagri.org. Why do I say that? Because the ICA took a minority share into this, because we believe that the close to 250 million cooperative farmers can be having a lot of benefits from Region Agri as a systems certificate. So that's systems. And then we go to company labels. So then you have labels like Jet will tell, like the B Corps. It's certifying your company in a certain way, in a very precise measurement on indicators in relation to sustainability. There are different company labels, and I don't want to lose too much time there. Jet will tell all about it, because you can also have organizations that are both co-ops and certified B Corps and also have fair trade. So it comes together. And from here, I would like to go, what are my lessons learned? So the one lesson learned, which is not on this list, is that these young coffee guys apparently don't consider co-ops as an interesting enough branding on their pack. Only if you go deeper down inside, you see co-ops. It's a pre-branding kind of a thing. The other thing I've learned is that big capital take dominance in the world of sustainability, which is in principle not bad. but they hijacked the model. And so the evidence is now at the shoulders of the farmers, the weakest, whereas big companies still make billions of money. We see a further concentration of power in the hands of less and less companies through mergers and acquisitions, and they just stamp it sustainable. So I have lost faith in that process, to be frank. And from authentic to opportunistic, there's so many greenwashing labels around that are not really sincere, not really checked well. That's another lesson I've learned. And I've also learned a huge other lesson, that there is a fantastic difference between a citizen and a consumer. We're all Homo sapiens, human beings, but we have different identities. One of them is of a citizen. So for instance, if I were to ask the average Dutch citizen, I'm from the Netherlands, have you heard of fair trade? I think the latest count was, because we are in all the school books and all that, 76% would say immediately yes. And 23 can tell you the story. However, the market share is only 3%, because at the moment when a citizen passes the threshold of a grocery shop, it converts into another animal, and that animal is called consumer. And consumers are driven by other values: price, quality, brand loyalty, and issues like human rights or avoided deforestation score only 2 to 1% in the mix of why you are going to purchase a product. And the last thing I wanted to share with you is, when legislation comes in, normally you move to the lowest common denominator. So many of those wonderful initiatives are now in legislation, in the European Commission, in Japan, also in California. But in order to ensure that it's been widely adopted, you see a downgrading of, let's say, the value of what we have set up. So legislation in itself is great. You get the laggards on board, but the laggards have good lobbyists. They ensure that it's low enough so that they can step in. And the question is this the right way or not? So those are my lessons learned on a daily basis. Now I'm at the world of co-ops. So I have to start a whole new cycle of lessons learned with our communication. So for your information, the first product I happened to produce with the support of Violetta, with Erbin and many others, is our new strategy. We call it Practice, Promote, and Protect. So it fits to the overall purpose of the International Cooperative Alliance, which was created in 1895. You know, its umbrella is keep the movement united despite its differences, but we have 3 pillars of activity. One is to protect. It's our alpha. We need to protect our values and principles. And that's the good news. If I compare it with the birth of Fair Trade Labeling Organization, we don't need to fight over our standard, because our standard is held by the ICA. We are the custodian of the definition of a statement of cooperative identity. So that's great. Erbin and I and others are working on sort of modifying that. Every 30 years we do that, but ICA is the undisputed custodian of the statement of the cooperative identity. So that is a great gain in comparison to what we needed to do with fair trade. There were like 10 different standards in the air. So protect is the alpha. To promote is are the means of everyday communication, education, advocacy, and then to practice is help to expand the business of co-ops. To that we have created CM50, a platform for co-ops that really want to double the size of co-ops. So that is our basic strategy, and branding is a key component to that communication. So we have a unique marquee. So the ICA is the trademark holder of this well-known logo you can see here. You know, this infinite COOP. Violetta will talk much more about it because she's working on it on a daily basis. But my gosh, if you look to the history of co-ops, we have been playing around with all this for a long, long time. So for instance, in the Americas, in particular in the 50s and the 60s, those 2 trees became very symbolic For co-ops, it was like a recognition stamp, but it didn't have a global reach. It had an America broad reach. I've seen it in Argentina, in Brazil, in the United States, in Canada. We really tried together. Then on the other side of the corner, you see the ICA rainbow. This is the original flag. It's now sort of been hijacked by the LBQTI community, but that has been our other global branding. And here you see all kinds of attempts to create a unified co-op brand. And here you see what we currently have since 2013. Am I right, Violetta? 2013, right? That's the year. But it for me is like a huge flashback on how difficult it is to create a unified brand. And I think it is necessary to become really better recognized. I'm almost done with my presentation, Aaron and Erbin. So for instance, this is where Violetta will talk about. Violetta is working together also with Erbin and me and others to ensure that this co-op brand is being promoted in various ways. We have the marquee, we have the world map, we own, ICA owns together with the American apex body, the .coop top level domain. So Violetta, please stay in this call. Listeners will tell much more about all this, right? And then you go to the next question. If we were to go to a unified cooperative mark, I would believe it will create a huge value. Then the big question is, how can you do this in the best possible way? So one way is, as the Canadians are trying to do it, they presented it yesterday, they really see how important it is to combine two huge prides in the cooperative sector. On the one hand, that we are co-ops, but on the other hand, that we are from Belgium or from Australia or from Argentina. So this double pride is somehow coming together in this unified co-op logo idea, which has now been endorsed and approved in Canada. I think there was a session about this, Aaron, am I right, yesterday. But that's just one way of doing it. On the other hand, you have the marvelous country of Bhutan, who wants to set up a bee co-op and spread this as the global unified label. So morale of the story here is the African saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to come far, go together. So I think that the co-op movement is only now ready to move towards this unified mark, because there's a lot of energy around it, but we cannot say what the Canadians do is best or what the Bhutanians do is best. We need to build a coordinated approach. And this is my last slide to everyone. And because if we build a co-op mark, how would it work in practice, in my view? So my lessons learned, and as you see, I've been working my whole career in all this, is that we should not go for raising the bar, but rather for raising the floor. So, and I agree with all the other schemes, so no hard feelings here, but raising the bar is based on audited certification schemes, as you can see. It tries to create a process of I am the best. You have to go over a minimum compliance hurdle. Then you have a shakeout phase, and then you want to be best in class. It's a performance competition. You raise the bar all the time. I believe that co-ops as a marquee is a membership verification. And instead of trying to work with certifications and show evidence, we want to work with a democratic mark, which is owned by the ICA, and we are going to an inclusive gradual improvement, raising the floor. So by default, all the co-ops have the right to use the mark. And it is through the ICA and its actors, like what Violetta is doing, we can then gradually ensure the dignity and the credibility of the co-op label is growing. And that will guarantee that in the future occasions, this very pack of coffee will start saying, proud to be a cooperative product. That's the target. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so
Back to
much,
you, Rob.
Jeroen. So much there to talk about and unpack. That was fantastic. Um, I'm just looking through the comments to see if we have any questions coming up yet. Andrew Escobar asks a good question, I think. Does the co-op brand need to expand to include non-Latin script languages? This is certainly one of those, questions around international recognition that I think people have wrestled with over the years. But do you have thoughts you'd want to share on that?
I mean, co-op as our own mark, I think is the beauty of it is it's a non-language term. But the thing is, we can get used to the most crazy brand names. There's a famous ice cream. It's called Haagen-Dazs. I mean, what does that mean on earth? But the whole world recognizes the name. So it's not about the name. It's about how you load it, how you communicate it. And I think co-op is sort of a multi-language word. It's how we use it rather than the precise language it fits in.
Great. I think Alicia Corton is asking, how would you describe the stage of rollout of some of these ideas? I mean, this is a big part of what this symposium is about, is sort of sharing the various stages of dialogue and progress here. But is there anything you would share about that based on some recent dialogues?
So, Erbin, I've been on a course which is called the Rhineland Management Model. And that chief told me when the word rollout is used, you have to be very cautious. That's the most dangerous word there is, because that presumes that I'm at the top and I can just throw it out.
Excellent.
So,
Yeah.
sorry, Erbin, rollout will not be the right term.
No,
It is
I think
about,
that's an excellent response, and I think it speaks to, both the challenge and the opportunity we have as a movement, right? This is not a top-down decision that is simply going to be made and then
no,
rolled out. It is something that is more of a process and dialogue. So I think that's a great answer.
we need
I
to
see,
roll it up. We need to roll it
roll it
up.
up. I see Nicholas with his hand up. Nicholas, please. There you are. I think you're muted, sir.
Yep. Hi. You hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Hi, everybody. I'm from Ghana, where I am supporting the Ghana Cooperative Council. I was just in Malawi, so all these questions are very interesting for us. I am very interested in this question, the fair trade. I must admit, I don't know enough about the fair trade, and most of these federations don't yet work with fair trade. So I have to still understand like how the fair price is calculated, But in your example, Mr. Jeroen, the coffee you were holding in your hand, this is a B Corp that purchases coffee from co-ops, right? Um,
Sort of.
Sort of. So, I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
my
It's a bit different, but go ahead. Tell your story, please. Yeah.
my reflection, no, my question is more like the radical thing I would like to see is coffee that is owned by farmers, right? A coffee brand that is owned by producers, because all over the world right now is obviously a lot of greenwashing, social washing. You have all types of companies that are traceable, fair trade, you name it. But end of the day, I am working with them right now. The farmers, they don't get much difference, and they're still in extreme poverty. So
Mhm.
the real radical difference would be the profit being distributed to farmers. That's what I want to buy, and that's not what I'm seeing yet. So can you inform us about this? I'm sure the ICA is
Yeah.
obviously working with this. Thank you so much.
I mean, it's a wonderful question. Say hello to my Ghanaian friends. I've been there so many times, and I helped to build the cooperative cocoa sector myself. So cocoa and co-ops in Ghana is now emerging. Great. Um, I think Jed gave the accurate response to what B Corps does with this pack of coffee, but let's not go into the nitty-gritties over there. What you say here, Nicholas, is the essence. How can we empower in the supply chain the farmers? How can we do that? And I mean, I've worked my whole life to ensure a better business deal for those smallholder farmers and also have invested in jointly building our own coffee brand. However, um, going to the market with specialized coffees, you need huge capital. How can you ensure that investors allow shareholders from smallholders on board? We did that with bananas, um, but it's very difficult to build a supply chain in the reversed order. There are ways to do that, but it's a hell of a job. Tony Chocoloni, one of the projects that I co-created, is giving a better price to cocoa farmers, but still the cocoa farmers are not owners of that. So the ownership component is precisely what is missing also in fair trade. Fair trade, I will never spit in my own cradle because it's still the best deal around for farmers. Let me just say it. Over a trajectory of 40 years, on average, when a pound of green coffee was sold for $1, fair trade has been paying 40% on top, on average. It really depends on the fluctuations of the market. It's the best deal, but it is by no comparison the deal that you want. Coffee, cocoa, bananas are just between 3 and 6% of retail prices. And that can be changed only through co-ops. So the reason why I got back from sector transformation to systems change is because I'm done with all those certificates. It will not really change the market structure. And co-ops have, in essence, the solution. And that's the difference between those labels, which is about sector transformation, and co-ops, where ownership and democracy and wealth distribution are at its core.
I'll just briefly add, Nicholas, when I was at Equal Exchange, I worked pretty closely with the Kilimanjaro Native Cooperative Union in Tanzania, actually founded in 1924. And they are very involved in the fair trade movement. They might give you some guidance on, what it looks like from a producer co-op perspective in Africa. There's also some fair trade certified co-ops in Uganda. You might just want to go to the Fair Trade Register and look and see who in your geographic area is under that certification scheme, and reach out to them for their perspective on what works and what doesn't.
Well,
And
I
Erbin
guess
and I, we are biased because we are both big fans of fair trade. Let us just say, right?
Well, we're big fans of fair trade, and I think we're both. I'll talk about this a little bit in a moment. Part of the challenge over time has been strengthening the position of producer co-ops within fair trade and ensuring that they don't lose their footing. And I think that's a task for the movement as a whole, not just for the producer partners.
Agreed.
Let's see if we have another question. Feel free to raise your hand. We've been talking in the chat. There's quite a little bit about Pachamama. I'm not sure how familiar you are with them, Jeroen, but it's a brand here in the U.S. that's owned by cooperative federations in the global South. We used to call it the developing world, but as a very interesting example. And my memory is they really emerged from a dissatisfaction with the level of control retailers had with the fair trade system, and they wanted to launch this brand that they owned to sort of capture more of the dollar, as well as be competitive on pricing in the North. Alicia, I apologize if I messed up your comment there. Would you like to correct me?
Oh no, actually, I was taking the fall because I use the term rollout, so I was giving you a little protective cover there. But I wanted to ask, uh, what is a fascinating idea, and what could we be doing, the 74 people on the call, to help bring it to life? It sounds like this logo is not something we can actually use yet. Can we be, talking about it? At what point can we use it? So where do the troops, start to give this a life of its own?
In terms of the mark specifically?
Yeah, the mark specifically.
Yeah, can I suggest we hold that? Because we're gonna have Violetta on our panel, and I think that's one of the things that she can dig into, unless there's anything you'd want to add right now, Jeroen. I think that's a good one to
Maybe
leave.
on a high note, there's already a massive use of the label.
Yeah.
On a low note, we have 500 different ones here and there. So the recognizability is a problem.
Yeah, yeah. Is that okay, Alicia?
Well, I actually mean the idea that you just outlined of having a standardized logo where we really recognize each other,
Yep.
more easily across the products.
I think that's exactly what we'll get into. Yeah, thank you. Namo, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Please let me know.
Thanks, Erbin. I've got a question for Jeroen here. Could you kindly explain what you mean by raising the bar before I ask my question? I wanted to ask a question because I'm calling from Africa and probably make a suggestion as well.
So raising the bar, thanks for the question, Namo, is that there's a tendency by larger market players to ever again try to raise the complexity of compliance. So standards are becoming very, very sophisticated. Jed will talk about that. But there's some standards that are so difficult to achieve that you really need almost investing millions to get to that level. So raising the bar is actually, in my view, a methodology to shake out, and the winners are the real big investors who can use then such a brand. That's raising the bar. It's a competition to the top. Whereas raising the floor is that we all get the chance to move upwards slowly. I hope that answers your question.
So I guess my assumption was correct. Yesterday, we learned something very interesting from Jason, who was speaking about the importance of culture and how to deal with the current mythology about being in business where everybody thinks capitalism is the solution. In Africa, are we not dependent for a third party of other people to build capacity as cooperatives? Because the little that I understand about cooperatives, we are the workers, we are the community which actually forms the market, the people who actually buy the end product or the end service. How do we capacitate ourselves? And I think it falls within your practice, promote, and protect. How can we build capacity to then participate in these markets instead of waiting for somebody to determine what's fair trade, what's the right price to pay? Yet we own the land, which is a factor of production. We own the human capital, which is a factor of production, and we determine who desires what product, what service. So if you look at it, at least we have a claim to about 60 to 70% of what's required for us to be participating in trade. So as cooperatives, how can Africa be assisted to claim that stake instead of being dependent on a third party to determine what's right and what's wrong? That would be my observation and rolled up in a question as well.
That's a big question, and I will be short because time is a bit our enemy as usual. But I mean, take this example like Pachamama Coffee or Agrofair Bananas. There are companies whereby farmers, also from Africa, become co-shareholders throughout the supply chain. And then you really empower, instead of trying to set up only a better farm management system, which is also important, and only having access to capital, which is also important. Try to build vertically integrated supply chains. The higher up you get, the more value is there. So that is my advice, but it's not easy.
Thank you. I think, Aaron, are we thinking of trying to squeeze in a 5-minute break? And before we do that, see if Tammy would like to ask a question?
Sounds good.
Actually, I didn't want to ask a question, Erbin, and Jeroen,
okay.
I wanted to make an interesting observation and statement. And it's interesting, the question of how do we get this message out there and what we heard. So what's the call to action and what are we going to do? And it's funny, I did some work with a company, God, about a decade ago, a startup here in Canada, Clothesline Media. And I think about the clothesline and you think about the 50s, that's how messages got across, countries through the ladies and men hanging their clothes on the clothesline. But if you think about the clothesline, it's a rope, a cord, a wire stretched between 2 points, right? Or many points, posts, trees, walls, used up to hang up wet laundry, right? So things like that. In sports, it's a slang thing. You stop somebody and it's a penalty. But in figurative language, it's used as a metaphor to describe something stretched out in a straight continuous line or to represent a sequence of events being laid out. So I almost think that co-op worldwide needs to think like a clothesline and stretch our reach beyond. And if you can use that metaphor to make that apply to what we're talking about, that's how co-ops I see making a huge difference in free trade. So that was just a thought, and it made me think about the clothesline when we were talking.
Great. Thank you. I'm just trying to sift through the comments. Aaron, I don't know if you saw anything that we want to try to pick up with a few minutes.
Well, I think we can address things within the discussion after the panel as well. There's been a lot of really good comments and things coming in, some that are maybe bigger than we can tackle today, but maybe folks in the chat want to give their perspectives.
Great.
Yeah, I guess one question around why don't more cooperative organizations brand their products and services as co-op? I think this is an age-old question of is it a market advantage for folks to identify as a co-op? Is there enough public awareness to have that leverage people's attention and translate that into the ability for them to act to purchase or partner? So that's a question that came up.
Yeah, I think I'll get at that a little bit in some of my opening comments for the panel. I also mentioned in the chat, it's also often a historical and cultural question. In the US, for example, the Cold War was seen as not an ideal time to promote your cooperative identity. And many cooperatives actually took cooperative out of their name kind of to be a little less visible and exposed because the model was seen as too aligned with left causes. And rebuilding from that takes time, energy, political will. I think there's also the question of business education, right? As cooperatives grow and hire people from outside the co-op world, the identity is not necessarily seen as important. And that's something that the center is working to try to address by making business education available that is focused on the identity. So those are a couple things. Gerald, I'd like to squeeze you in before we go to a quick break. Unmute. Still muted. There you go.
Hello. Yeah, my name is Jeroen. I'm from Germany, and I just have got one question. Can we start to introduce this co-op brand in Germany within the next 6 months? Because we have got a few ideas, and we would ask some shareholders what they think about stakeholders, what they think about this brand, and we do a survey, and we could put this into our survey to ask about 1,500 directors of cooperatives what they think about this matter.
Can I say something there, Erbin?
Absolutely.
Yeah, no. I mean, that's the right spirit, Gerald. We need to move. We need to move smart, however. So I'm looking for a coalition of the willing that are really interested to look into making this work. So the way forward, I believe, is what I would call shining examples. So if you could create a shining example with 5 or 6 other countries together, we can create traction. What is also important is that we are happy to say bye-bye forever to our love babies. And that's the more difficult part. But other than that, creating some shining examples on the axis of your double pride. You have a proud cooperative movement in Germany, but you also are proud of being part of a global cooperative movement. That together is the way forward, I believe. So we need to set up a task force or a working group that wants to go there. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to come far, we need to do this together. I repeat that because I think that's the essence. And the last thing before the break, I want to finish on my end, if you don't care, Erbin, is I did not want to say that a race to the top is necessarily bad. It keeps us sharp and focused. So I'm not against those labels that tried to create this competition, because we're operating in a market system, but co-ops are a movement, and that is a totally different approach. We want to be inclusive and also ensure that the unassumed can carry the pride of the co-op mark.
Great, thank you. Before we go to break, I'll just add, since it's come up a couple of times here, there is a way to access the current mark, which is part of .cooperation system. So if you go through the verification process and you use the .coop URL, you are able to use the mark. So we'll get into that a little bit more with Violetta. I know, one of the challenges we have, as Jeroen pointed out, is the multiplicity of labels, the noise in the marketplace, the messages we're receiving, and it can be hard to recognize the tools we already have in place, right? And how we can prioritize those and use them together. So that opportunity is there, and I'm hoping that one of the outcomes of this dialogue will be both raising the profile of some of the systems that we already have in place and some of the lessons from those, and also explorations of where we can do more and better in sharing our message. So maybe with that, Aaron, would you still like for us to do a few minute break? Does that sound good to everybody?
I think we should, in respect to the speakers as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, but everyone can stay on the line, and we'll just take just 3 minutes, just at the top of the hour, for folks to move or get water, whatever you need.
Great. Thank you so much. So we will be back. I'm going to go ahead and share my PowerPoint. Can everyone see that okay? Thank you. Well, first, just again, to thank Jeroen for getting us started with so much information, in the comments and feedback, I think, point to how important and what would I say, relevant this conversation is at this moment. I think there's a real opportunity for us to shift the recognition of our movement in a very powerful way. And to start out, I just wanted to offer a few thoughts on how I've been thinking about this over the years. And of course, I risk duplicating some language with Jeroen, because we've talked about this so much. But I think I can offer some perspective from a slightly different angle. So I'm going to give that a shot. So when I think about some of the obstacles to cooperatives really picking up and making the most of the cooperative brand, I've sort of identified a couple of tensions. One of them is between the individual brand or message of an individual co-op and the the benefits or sometimes what they see as the downsides of being associated with a wider social movement. And then there's this other tension between the characteristics of the product or service that a cooperative provides versus its core purpose and how it's controlled and how that can help differentiate itself in the marketplace. So to think about that just from some of my experience, this parallels some of the things that Jeroen was talking about. A lot of the way that I think about this came from my experience with the first cooperative that I worked with. Equal Exchange's identity as a leading worker co-op is pretty well established now. But when I joined, and in fact, the reason that I joined the co-op was because of its commitment to Latin American solidarity and the alternative trade movement. At that time, it was very much more aligned with the fair trade movement than necessarily the co-op movement. And in fact, it's the potential of the movement to fundamentally alter economic relationships between North and South that really brought me there. I think that's something Jeroen and I have in common. But for us, however, as the fair trade movement grew, which was something that we wanted, it became more challenging for us to differentiate ourselves as a cooperative that was selling only fairly traded products, right? We were competing with much larger corporations that might sell one or two fair trade products in which they, treated producers well. But the rest of their line would just be sourced from the market. And that was a very challenging position for us to be in. And an early debate for us was how much for us was it about product certification and helping that system grow, and how much of it was our identity as a fair trade organization committed to changing economic relationships in everything that we do. I went the wrong direction. Parallel to this was a question of how to balance our individual brand as a fair trade organization and the message of being part of a wider movement for economic democracy. This was not only reflected in our own identity as a worker co-op, but also in the producer partners that we worked with, who were primarily farmer co-ops and federations, and the cooperative grocery stores, who were our core early adopters and remained our most committed customers. So on the one hand, we had producer partners who were facing competition from large plantations, some of them that might be certified as shade grown or rainforest certified. And on the other side, we had our retail partners, food co-ops, being pressured by large retailers who were, bringing in one or two fairly traded products, often at a lower price because they had a scale and were balancing those fairly traded products with conventional products. And at that time, I was fortunate to be in the marketing department, and I saw an opportunity for us to communicate something bigger. The director of the marketing department, we were working on bulk coffee bin cards, and there was a little blank spot in the bottom right corner. And I created a little Twin Pines logo and plopped it in there and said, "Can we do this?" And as Jeroen pointed out, the Twin Pines is much more recognizable in the Americas, but that's what we had to work with. And I'm humbled to say that still exists on Equal Exchange products, and it's also been picked up by a couple of other worker co-ops that I work with, like Real Pickles. I just want to go back for a second to the challenge that Jeroen was talking about in terms of the mainstreaming of fair trade. Part of the advantage for us was being identified as part of a larger system for economic democracy to help us differentiate. Now, that's not always useful in every single market, but by leveraging that where it spoke to people, where it did make a difference, we could strengthen those relationships with our core cooperative partners. So for the past 15 years, I've been working with the Neighboring Food Co-op Association, which is a secondary co-op of food co-ops here in the Northeast, that work together toward a vision of a thriving cooperative economy rooted in a healthy, just, and sustainable food system and a vibrant community of cooperative enterprise. And I think you can see how much the identity is rooted in that vision. A central challenge for us, or rather an opportunity, that we have seen, is working together to address the tendency of consumers to see our food co-op members as isolated enterprises with an important but limited local impact and even less potential for addressing the fundamental social and economic challenges of our time. Some have described this as our co-ops as being islands in a capitalist sea, right? However, our impact is all around us. And if we choose to connect those islands and make them more visible, I think it's not only a benefit for the movement as a whole, but a benefit for our individual components. For example, a founding purpose of our co-op was communicating the regional impact of our food co-ops and their shared contributions to more just, equitable, and sustainable local economies. And before we had done this, again, co-ops, our food co-ops were just seen as an isolated grocery store, maybe not even as a co-op. And by promoting our impact together, we could make that cooperative economy more visible. This in turn not only enables our system to be more visible, but helps our members communicate their impact more effectively to their members, shoppers, and policymakers in their regions. But when you think about the impact of our local food co-ops, again, that we are affecting one piece of the economy. And by connecting the dots with other sectors, we can actually make our impact even more visible. And, you know, from the beginning, Cabot Creamery Co-op has been a partner of ours. And when the co-op mark was launched, we actually started using it in this label that we gave to our co-ops to put on their shelves next to products from other co-ops. So whether those co-ops used the co-op symbol or name or the co-op mark, they were being visibly identified on the shelves to consumers as part of our wider ecosystem, for want of a better word. And this has not only led to greater visibility and marketing advantage, I would argue that it's led to greater opportunities for collaboration on the ground. And again, Cabot has been one of those key partners where we have worked on education together, on shared branding, on opportunities for helping our co-ops our consumers not only see the wider cooperative economy, but work together to advance it and make it grow more. This has also become a central part of our dialogue with the ICA's Cooperative Identity Consultation, which is reviewing the statement on the cooperative identity for its relevance and sort of those base values and principles that bring our movement together internationally. And of course, that work begs the question of if these values and principles are so important to us all, they offer an alternative vision for a more democratic economy. How can we work together to make it more visible to everyone and make our model more available to people who are looking for ways to impact their communities and build a better world together? So that's all just to say, in an ideal world, this cooperative identity is either something that encompasses all these characteristics, right? It strengthens an individual business's brand by aligning it with a wider movement for social and economic change. And it's significant not just in the products or services that cooperative delivers, but its basic purpose and control, which is, of course, totally different from the capitalist economy around us, which is primarily driven by maximization of profit. I want to be clear, that's not a negative. It's very good at what it does. We do something very different. And how can we get that across to consumers, policymakers, and people who are, you know, hungry to be part of something different at a very urgent time for our world and for our movement as a whole? So with that, I want to shift this over. I hope that was useful and helped look at some of these issues from a slightly different angle. We have a great panel with us today to continue this conversation. Joining myself and Jeroen is Violetta Nafpaktiti, who is the CEO of DotCooperation LLC, which is the entity managing assets for the promotion, development, and protection of cooperatives worldwide. These include the .coop domain and the co-op mark, which we've been discussing. Violetta has been actively involved. Sorry, let me get rid of my share so we can see faces. With .coop since its inception, accumulating a wealth of experience in the domain name and internet industry. She is an experienced presenter and traveled around the world to events organized by the International Cooperative Movement, speaking on subjects from cooperative identity, the cooperative difference, digital tech and innovation, the advancing progress of AI, as there's something we could unpack, as well as the potential and management of data. Originally from Greece, she's been living in the United Kingdom since the 1990s. And then we have Jed Davis, who is on the leadership team of Agrimark Dairy Cooperative here in the Northeast US. Agrimark is a certified B Corp since 2012 and is known for its Cabot, Macadam, and Agrimark products, award-winning dairy products. He's been actively engaged with cooperatives in his entire life, of which the first 3 decades were spent on his family's 6th-generation dairy, fruit, and vegetable farm in New England. He's worked with Cabot since 1991 in a variety of positions, and in 2008, Jed was named as the co-op's first full-time sustainability lead. His efforts center on helping the co-op and its brands aspire to an understanding of sustainability as living within our means and ensuring the means to live. He holds an MBA from the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth College, from where he also received his Bachelor of Arts degree. So welcome, everyone, to the next part of our conversation here. Please feel free to place comments in the chat, raise your hand. I do want to start with a few questions for our panelists to sort of get the conversation going. And I wanted to start with Jed, who, as you heard, we've worked together a lot over the years. And, you know, from my perspective, Cabot has always been deeply committed to the cooperative movement and to marketing its co-op advantage. But we've also talked about the sort of evolving trends in co-ops more openly promoting their identity, right? At points in the past, you'd see co-op on the front of Cabot's packages. Sometimes it's on the side. Sometimes it's, you know, content in the packaging itself. And I wanted to see if you might be able to share with us, you know, sort of your thoughts on Cabot's growing emphasis on its cooperative roots and how it works to grow the wider movement.
No, I appreciate it, Erbin, and it's great to be here with you all. You know, so our co-op, and we're a relatively small dairy co-op in the northeastern part of the United States, but we have had the benefit of, you know, some of my mentor at Cabot, Roberta McDonald, who embraced very early on this importance of connecting our products with our consumers. And let me give you the backdrop. We're talking about consumers in the United States who these days are often multiple generations away from actually having any farming connection at all, right? And you know, one of the challenges is making sure they understand that, you know, our cooperative of dairy farm families are trying to make award-winning products and nutritious items that they can consume, but connect that. How do we connect that in a tangible way that helps the brand as well as helping those farmers by the consumers picking up the product and putting it in their basket? One of the things that we realized, and Erbin, you know, speaks to this, I'm going to say probably in the 1990s, we really started exploring how do we communicate that we're a cooperative in a way that's positively understood and very clear. And what we learned early on is, you know, from some of the research we did is we needed to connect to the people, right? And this has been a theme that we've heard throughout here about how do we get benefit back to the actual farmers and so forth. And one of the ways we chose to do that was actually put their face on the product, right? And actually try to, even if their face wasn't on the product themselves, it was very closely identifying their faces with pretty much everything that we were doing. And you'll see that often we didn't lead with co-op, the expression, as much as we led with farmer owned and used farmer owned as, if you will, the gateway to then speak about the fact that we're a cooperative, that the farmers actually own us. Because what we found in our research was that consumers often were confused about that. And the governance portion of being a cooperative, and Erbin, you know, correctly mentioned that in the United States, in the past, there were often times where that was seen as having political attributes, regardless of whether they actually existed or not. And so trying to navigate that, you know, became very important. It became sort of a stepped process of making the connection to the farmers, making then the notion of farmer owned equivalent to being a cooperative, and then really kind of bringing that to a point where that could be seen, and our research showed it, that that was a positive attribute in both brand awareness, but also product selection, right? I mean, we want there to be awareness of the co-op notion and the co-op label and so forth. But ultimately, as a consumer-facing brand, we want to make sure that that awareness results in purchase and ideally zealotry in the future, right? That we actually have a base of consumers who then are taking a positive experience with our product and using that as a way to look at other products that they procure.
Right, right. And actively going out of their way to pick your products up off the shelf because of those characteristics. Yeah.
That's
Is,
the win we're looking for, Erbin. Exactly.
you want more people to be like me.
Yeah, thanks. Our farmers appreciate that support.
So obviously, as you mentioned, and I know recently, I mean, there's been times when Cabot had cooperative in its logo banner. I think you've got a co-op symbol on the back of a number of your products. You were also a very early adopter of B Corp certification. So I think it would be great to just hear a little bit, what were the incentives you saw to also pursue another certification? Because you, of all people, can probably point out that costs money. It takes time. You're putting not just yourself, but also often your members through different processes, and you want to make sure it's worth it. So what were the sort of outcomes you were hoping for from that?
Sure. And I thought that, in Jeroen's presentation, he had a couple of slides that really spoke to this, starting with the fact that we were not, in our case, specifically looking for a product level certification. We really were looking for more of an organization wide. How do we aspire? What's the path we're following to, credibly operate our organization in a way that's positive, right? And so,
Folks, sorry
Media,
about that.
can you mute?
Got it.
There you go.
All right. So Erbin, for us, our co-opness expresses a certain part of our identity, but we felt that that did not explicitly speak to some of our goals relative to the broader space of sustainability. Really, that desire to have third-party acknowledgement of the efforts we're pursuing around transparency and accountability and social and environmental impacts.
Right.
To your point, these are not inexpensive efforts, and they do take a lot of resources in terms of staff time and our member time. But at the end of the day, we felt that was, and really it's a companion. We feel like that combination is a very rich companion. And our research is saying that it's recognized that. Now, B Corp, which is operated by an organization called B Lab, their standards folks have been really dramatically, they just this past year unveiled brand new standards and a different approach, in part because they proactively are trying to avoid some of the concerns around potential greenwashing. And so we are, we're navigating those. We've recertified as a B Corp 4 times now, and this will be a new exercise with new standards coming up. But we're readying for that for our recertification next year. But we see both as, and at the end of the day, if you ask me, I'm going to say there's tremendously good alignment between the ICA principles and sort of the principles of sustainability. Sometimes they're not as directly obvious as we might wish, or that I might wish, And so I feel like holding both of those attributes for our brand is cumulatively more positive than the positivity of either one by itself, mutually additive.
Maybe before we move on, maybe I'll ask, I don't think it's a controversial question. You know, if I'm buying dairy, it's either from Cabot or Organic Valley. There's no way around it. However, when I think about when I look at some of the other corporations out there that have B Corp certification, from my point of view, like it's the co-op identity that's way more important. And sometimes I actually feels like it diminishes Cabot's identity. And I'm just wondering if you ever feel like there are tensions there as well as, you know, the positives that you obviously feel like you're gaining in the marketplace. Are there also tensions?
So in some ways, and I think this is good news for this audience, we our recent research, we did a recent round in 2026 of research, and of the two messages, the fact that we're a certified B Corp and the fact that we're a cooperative, the response was much more positive in terms of awareness on the cooperative side, which to me says 3 decades of really trying to have co-op on the packaging, in our narrative, in our storytelling, it is, resulting in positive traction. One of the challenges with the B Corp certification is I love we've been involved with that from the very beginning, and I really love what they set out to do. I think they've prioritized a lot of very good things in the development of that certification. One of the things that has not really been prioritized enough is brand awareness, right? In other words, what does that? And I would say the feedback we've gotten more often is, especially around certain demographics, is just a lack of familiarity with the B Corp certification.
Yeah.
Can I
That's
get
great.
in
Thank you.
here?
That's really
Aaron,
valuable.
can I just get in here? Because Jed, you said, trying to figure out your two core messages, co-op and B-Lab. But I think you started your story by saying our core message was farmer owned.
Yes.
So I'm just very curious to see what's still left of that and how does that resonate in the market space, because I sometimes feel that might probably be even a stronger message than co-op or B Corp. Can you just tell us a little bit about farmer owned,
Sure.
what it does with consumers?
Yes, and so it personalizes it, right? I mean, right at the onset. And interestingly enough, the slide that was up a little bit earlier, where the largest font size there related to farmer owned, I mentioned about us very consciously using the farmers as sort of the gateway into better understanding of co-op. And then here, so this was a visual that our marketing team used 1 month ago. Okay, so
You're using three messages: co-op, farmer owned, and B Corp. So
yes.
I just want to know what's the winning one.
Well, and I think that the size of the font tells the answer, right? We continue to lead with the farmer, and visually we lead with the farmer, but we follow up with a very specific statement that we're a farmer-owned cooperative. We want that to be part of the messaging, and then also that we are a certified B Corp. But I think that also very correctly lists the order of importance in terms of what we're hearing today resonates with our consumers.
So sorry to ask one more question there, but we've been doing plenty of research with external, well-known marketing institutions, and that's why I made this distinction between a citizen versus a consumer. Is this message interesting for consumers as well? Because there's this huge gap between what people say and how they act. Fair trade, great example. 75% says yes, I know it, and I regularly buy it, and the market share is just 3-4%. So, what's your pick on that?
Well, and I think you're absolutely right. And this is where on all levels, when we're testing our messaging and so forth, and testing whether it is the farmer-owned part that resonates most, or whether it's the B Corp or it's the co-op part, again, you're seeing it show up in a very, intentional order here, because at the end of the day, a cooperative is still a conceptual notion for either citizen, or maybe less for citizen, but more for consumer in many cases. Whereas being able to purchase a product that supports a local community of, in this case, farmers, that has a lot, that's very tangible, right? And, in your earlier example of the coffee, right, where you really have to dig into that to figure out who you're supporting. It was interesting. I did do a little research prior to this panel to see, and Violetta will be happy. I dipped my toe into AI to do this, but I asked, is there any brand that is a certified B Corp, a fair trade product, and a cooperative? And I only found one. There is I'll put the link in
Oh,
the
I like this cliffhanger.
exactly. And the drum roll, please. The answer is, it is a I know this only from the website. It is a cooperative of coffee
Oh, yeah.
roasters who have a fair trade product, and they are also a certified B Corp. So, but I think that maybe speaks to, using Erbin's Venn diagram there. It's a small number of
So it does
folks.
exist that they come together. It's so funny. This is very, very helpful.
So thank you, Jed. Really appreciate that. And I guess one dynamic I think we need to keep thinking about too is both the consumer perception and how that is real, which is sort of, receiving feedback, and the push, right? Because Cabot has also pushed very heavily on educating what co-op means, right? And so I think Cabot's a good example of not just responding to market signals, but also trying to influence those market signals a little bit.
Yes.
So I do want to move to Violetta, particularly because so many questions came up in the first half of our session about both the URL as well as the mark. And I just wanted to see if you could just tell us a little bit about the evolution of the domain and the initiative behind that, as well as the mark, and how they became part of our movement's global brand.
Thank you, Erbin. And indeed, first of all, I want to say how fascinating Jeroen's lecture, as he called it, was. I'm delighted that we're having this discussion, because I want to say that I want to start by saying that it's what is important historically, I think, here to make a point, is that the co-op movement understood, surprisingly very early, that identity matters, and that identity matters globally and especially digitally. And I'm saying this because I've been in the .coop domain, running the .coop domain for the co-op movement from the early 2000s. So that's before Big Corp. And that was also when the internet was still a relatively tiny place, before it was even, well, it was starting then to become commercialized. So we were departing of this idea of the internet as essentially as a co-op of knowledge, right? Open access and a beautiful new world of knowledge and sharing and communicating that we had back then, the beautiful internet we had, not today's internet. And the co-op movement actually were pioneers in, some members within the co-op movement. And so the creation of .coop was quite visionary, because it happened back in 2002. The internet back then had only 20 of those top level domains. Okay, let's think of them as cities in a virtual world that is the internet. And now there are over 2,000. So very similar to Jeroen's presentation and yours, Erbin, where you showed all these different marks and labels. Identity has been a thing in our digital economy as well. And so I'm very proud to say that the co-op movement has the insight, and I want to congratulate us all for still maintaining this domain name. And I want to say for starters that, the difference, why I think I haven't done that bad a job is that 10 years ago, I would come to a panel like this and most of the participants would have a dot something else email address. And now all the panelists of this panel specifically, thankfully, all have a .coop email address and a website. So what I want to really drill down here is that the co-op movement specifically designed a protected digital namespace, which was reserved for cooperatives and still is, or organizations that are eligible per our standards that we, as in we.coop with the ICA, and the ICA structure is essentially verifying users of this namespace. So it was an identity and trust initiative for the digital space. So we wanted to have a digital space that's trusted, that's connected to the core principles. And we had, so the DotCooperation LLC was created back, it was an effort that initiated actually from NCBA CLUSA, and supported by large organizations, including CMC from all over the world, essentially, namely the members of the ICA that at the time understood the vision. And so over time, the role of .coop, and by .coop, we refer to both the domain, the dot with a COOP, but also please listen to .coop as a .cooperation LLC, which is the entity that, started off running this domain name dedicated to co-ops, but it later evolved because it's part of the movement and because it has now become something beyond a domain namespace, because it is running a variety of identity assets that are helping the co-op movement, the global co-op movement, to unite. So we have the co-op mark, as you know, and that was launched by the ICA through a very long consultation and democratic process that the ICA used with its members to come up with a common brand, which is, again, a visual brand. It's not co-op the word, it's an image, something that we all know. In my language, in Greek, the word cooperative, can I say it, is syneterismos. Everybody will see co-op, though, and understand what that means.
Yeah.
We can't really translate it. Also, we don't all have Latin scripts. Hello? So the co-op movement is such a huge, diverse entity, and we call it, the people working at the global stakeholder level, we see it as a homogeneous body. And we assume that it's easy to create a brand because we think of brands like brands of the private businesses. We think of brands, like Jeroen says, and like you, Erbin, it's not just the product. It's not just about the system. It's not just about a movement. It encompasses everything, really, because ultimately we cannot compare apples and oranges. We as co-ops, and surely, all of you members of the co-op movement we are essentially a different type of business structurally. And so when we are trying to compare, why would we want a big corp? When we say, oh, well, why do we want a big corp? I guess because we think we don't have the tools out there to to connect what we do as co-ops, that we're looking inside, we're looking in our local areas, in our communities to help our members predominantly. That is our key priority. we don't look to evangelize. We don't look to say, hey, did you know this is a different type of business model? And by the way, it exists globally and internationally, and we're all structured in a democratic way in the ICA structure. That I think is missing. And so it's been extremely challenging for .coop, a small business that was created back in 2002, to, let me give you a comparison. You know, we have 8,000, 9,000 almost registrations of .coop users. .com has 160 million. So how do we promote this? They ongoing spend a lot of money marketing. The monopoly, they are already, they don't even have available good names. They have names that they sell in the aftermarket. We never did that. We didn't rig the internet. So going back to the evolution of this, we have a variety of tools that we've effectively connected to the .coop domain because it was the original and because the domain, technically it's a database. And so we can police now the registration. We can essentially say, hey, we can take your domain down if we figure out that you're using the mark, that you are published on our lovely open map where we showcase our users for transparency. If we discover that you're not actually a co-op, we can do that. So the mechanisms and the assets have been around for a long time, and I'm very happy to take all these questions. And well, I'm happy and sometimes sad as well, because I think, oh, shoot, we've been doing this for a long time. So why are people still not knowing it? And I'm glad to know that a lot of people do get it and they know it. And indeed, even the proposal from the Canadians with the mark, with having a standard mark, it's beautiful. I love this. Music to our ears for everyone. But I do want to push back a little bit in saying that the brand isn't the design. The brand isn't the word, like Jeroen said. The brand is quite a lot of different things. And for us, for the co-op movement, I feel our strength in showing our brand is the way we run it, the way we govern it. And we already have quite a lot of systems in place. So I don't know if I've answered your question. It's a little bit, I didn't want to go into history too much.
Yeah. Maybe we can do a follow-up. I think it is important to recognize the history of the URL and mark. You know, there was a lot of momentum that came out of the first International Year of Co-ops and the blueprint for a cooperative decade. I think that there was a lot of progress there. And it seems like there's a lot of energy now coming out of the second International Year of Co-ops. And particularly as labels and other verifications come into play, I think that .coop's role in ensuring the integrity of whatever we want to call it, the co-op identity, the co-op brand, the understanding of what a co-op is. Maybe you could talk a little bit about why you think that verification is important, what it looks like now, and what it might look like moving forward as this momentum builds.
Sure, of course. Well, verification is extremely important because, as I mentioned before, it's embedded in in the way we're approaching identity assets, that they can't be assets. The asset will be diluted unless you have the brand, the identity will be diluted unless you have the right governance in place. It will lose its meaning. So that's why .coop is actually has become quite unusual, and even within our it's predominantly within our other top-level domain circles, the internet. So the top-level domain businesses like .coop are known as the backbone of the internet because the domain name system is like the telephony system, okay, for connecting on the internet. And so we're unique in that we have a very strict verification process. We verify every single user, and quite a lot of other top-level managers, they think that we're crazy. They still do, but actually over the 20 years of our history, they have now understood finally that we're probably the only domain with such low volumes and yet the most sustainable and quite frankly, the best in retainer rate. We have the highest rate, because if somebody understands the brand, if somebody understands well, first of all, if a consumer understands what a co-op is, they'll always go to the co-op. They'll trust it. And I know, Jad, you have research on that. I know our Canadian friends have done research. There's a lot. Indeed, even the internet, our regulator did a research about how .coop is perceived among the internet citizens, the netizens, and when people understood what a co-op is, they knew that that's the .coop domain for co-ops, and so we get it. We will go there. We trust. So that the verification is important, but of course they said, "Wow, you're crazy because you're never going to achieve those volumes." And we were like, "Well, yeah, sure, the growth will be slow." And it's like what Jeroen says. We're slow, but because we want to do it collectively, because we're doing it completely different. It isn't a volume model. It's about standards. So our verification essentially is such that asks every single registrant to tick a box that says that they adhere to the ICA's cooperative identity statement, and that they adhere to us as in .coop, owned by the ICA and its members, yeah, to go back and audit them, to go and take down their domain if we judge that they don't meet our eligibility criteria. Now, that criteria are up to the ICA and its members to debate, to reinforce, to tell us. We're just the instrument. And on top of that, we're using a very kind of very transparent and self-policing mechanism, because we say, well, all the users of this domain and the mark, because the mark is given to you for free once you've been verified with the .coop domain. So we've got you in the system, we give you the mark, and then we put you on a global map, worldmap.coop, which is open source, and then you can then from that build. This project is meant to be, and by the way, not only can you build better systems for enforcing identity or for understanding identity better, but it's a way for the wider community to see what co-ops are and to also question, are they really principal business? And that can happen through those tools that we provide. So that's why verification is hugely important. And we have gone through different versions of how we verify. But we have never, ever considered dropping that, despite pressures from the market itself.
Great, thank you. I think we have a specific question right now from Leire. How many people and from how many countries are using the mark and .coop now? Do we have an easy number on that?
So for .coop and the mark is about 9,000 and from about 95 countries, different countries. For mark alone, I couldn't tell you because anybody could just get the mark, you know?
Once you have the URL, you can use the mark and they don't
necessarily communicate. You have the URL, you can use the mark for free forever, unless you are ever found that you're not eligible. And that's one of the reasons why we've linked the domain with the mark, because how do we track the people who are using the mark without being in our database of the domain name and without actually going through our verification process, which has been embedded from the .coop to in the .coop domain process from the get-go.
Great. So we do have a few more minutes. If anyone would like to raise their hand or put a question in the chat. I do see a question. Oh, this is a good one, given some of our work recently. Where do credit unions fit into this? Do they get an advantage in using the .coop domain and a standardized logo? I'll just say you can get into some of the technicalities, Violetta. I'll say it's been very interesting in my region, where I mentioned we do a lot of cross-sector collaboration. There are a number of credit unions that use .coop, and there's a number that use .org. And I can tell you the ones that use .coop are the most engaged, collaborative, and interested in cross-sector collaboration. No surprise there, right? But it's like an indicator for those credit unions that see themselves as part of something bigger. But I know there's more around the domains that you might want to add around credit unions.
Yeah.
Right, such as the dot credit union, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. I didn't want to give you too much detail, but we are indeed also running the dot credit union domain, and we haven't been promoting it too much because it's a, if you like, it's a domain that we essentially got for defensive reasons. It was the Association of Credit Unions in the USA that initially applied and got it from the regulator. We didn't. It's a huge investment to get your own top level domain. We couldn't afford that. And so CUNA in North America, in the States and USA have acquired that, and then they didn't do anything about it. They wanted it so that nobody else can get it. And because the regulator is allowing anybody now to apply for such top level names. So your brand is on your top level domain now. It's not even on your second. And so we decided to approach them and to say, hey, if you're not doing anything, why don't we manage it alongside .coop? Because also, what are we trying to do? Compete with each other for yet more sub brands within us? Why don't we just figure out a way of working together, which is, again, back to the point of the mark and should we have a standard? I have experienced this tension throughout my career of wanting to be creative and differentiate and have our own personality and be different and be echoing our own cultural, historical, personal backgrounds, within our co-ops versus the need to unite under a brand that is essentially creating impact to the general public, because like we all say, we are the best kept secret. Maybe it's our choice to remain that secret. I don't know.
No, I'd say it's a really interesting question and something people might not assume, like taking sort of defensive actions on our identity and ensuring the integrity of our brand. Maybe we've just got a few more minutes. Maybe I'll throw a question out to all three of you to see if you have a quick comment. Take it or don't. Sort of to Violetta's point there. It's certainly my perspective that we're at a critical moment globally, socially, politically, economically, ecologically. It's a familiar place for our movement. At moments like these, historically, around the world, co-ops have emerged as an alternative for people who want more control over their economic lives. Given everything that we've talked about, I just wonder, like, what do you think is the most important thing we could do together at this moment to make sure we're visible to people who are looking for what we have to offer? What are your thoughts on the key opportunity we have at this moment?
I'm not sure I should answer this question because it's evident what I'm going to answer, what I'm going to say, can I
Just
plug more? Well, what I want to say is that if all the co-op people in the co-op movement that we hear, how many we are, I don't know, quite a few, quite a lot. If we all used the existing tools that we have there and go to identity.coop to discover them, already we have let's say, a digital comms campaign targeted to 5 billion internet users. So, number one, I'm sorry, it's so evident to me. And please do get in touch with me and telling me what the challenges are, because sure, I'm making it sound like, oh, come on, everybody should have one of those. Why can't you? Tell me. We want to hear that.
Yes, certainly the market is large, right? There's the estimate of 3 million cooperatives, right, Jeroen? And even a small portion of those. I guess the point that I would make is when you are using that URL, when you're using the mark, it's not just an advantage to you. You are contributing to a system that benefits all of our cooperatives in the wider movement. And it's not that expensive to do. I think Jed is unmuted.
Yeah, no, and I think I would just advocate that there's one step right before what Violetta was just saying, and that is, living into being a co-op. I think we still are in a situation where we have a lot of co-ops who maybe haven't pursued verification or inclusion in ICA, don't openly talk about being a cooperative, right? And that, Urban talked about a number of the factors, and Jeroen as well. But at the end of the day, we need to get over that, right? I mean, we need to understand that to accomplish the next steps that Violetta spoke to, we need to start by just owning that right now we offer an alternative to how to do business, how to treat people, how to bring in community. And I've got to say, the world needs us right now.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's great.
So
Jeroen, you're the only one who hasn't thrown your hat into this.
No, but I will. So the upside of traceability systems and in particular fair trade, but also B Corps, is that you really hold companies accountable for its entire footprint. So this procurement policy, this whole supply chain management is really important. That's not particularly the strength of co-op. It's also very good that we have organizations, enterprises, whereby inclusivity, democracy, profit sharing, and ownership sharing is out there. That's not necessarily the strength of corporates. So how beautiful would it be if we bring both worlds together? So in my view, this co-op coffees, as you mentioned, Jed, is sort of merging the two sets of values into what I think is the future of our new global economy.
Great. Thank you. And thank you again, Violetta, Jed, and Jeroen, for your comments. Thank you, everyone, for your great questions and feedback. Aaron, I don't know if you want to offer any follow-up resources or opportunities for additional questions or networking on this topic, but this would be the moment.
Sure. Well, I mean, and I'd like to give a teaser for the next session too, but I wanted to say this is great. This is what we wanted, this kind of conversation, and I'm feeling a momentum. I'm feeling something pushing at our back that is telling us to move forward with some of these plans. And we've got people from dozens of countries on the call throughout the symposium so far, and there seems to be a real consensus around, there being energy behind this. So thank you all for illuminating that even further.
Yeah, thank you so
and
much.
there's lots in the chat. So there's lots of links. There's lots of good ideas in the chat as well. I did want to close out one second just by sharing with folks the evaluation. You can fill this out throughout the event and every session that you attend. It helps us know what landed for you and was important and valuable and what you might want to see more of. I've got that in the chat as well. And we do have one more session coming up today, and that will be focusing on sustainability reporting and how that helps tell the cooperative story. Oops, sorry, are you seeing my chat? Violetta, do you have your hand up? Oh, I'm not hearing you.
Sorry, a very quick question, because I can see I have received some questions that I won't have time to respond in the chat.
Okay.
Could I please ask everyone who has asked me a question to send it back? I'm going to share my email with everyone here, and maybe you could just email me directly or WhatsApp me. I have also a mobile number that you can absolutely get in touch anytime. Thank you.
Great. And we will send a follow-up to everyone who attends this event to be able to share with you the presentations and whatnot. Many of them have the presenter contact information within them and the recordings as well. So we'll make sure that everybody gets a chance to see that. So we do hope that you join us. We've got a short break before our next session will be in 30 minutes. So I welcome everyone to take a break. If you stay on the line, it's no problem. We'll just move you into the waiting room. We'll do tech check with folks who are in that next segment in 15 minutes, but for everyone else, please stretch and come back energized. We've got 3 more presentations for you today, and then 3 more segments coming tomorrow. I will also post our LinkedIn. We're posting updates and recaps and photos of the events throughout the session, so feel free to repost and comment there if you're enjoying what you're seeing. Thanks, everyone.